The average rate of return on equity is around 4%. Now, many investors don't realize that because number one is they have gone a length of time, if ever, to have an evaluation of their property to know what their equity portion is. And then they haven't thought to look at their rate of return based upon the equity. Many of them will just say, will I earn X amount of net income per month or per year? Okay. But what does that mean relative to your equity that's available? And you'd be surprised again, because a lot of investors have substantial equity in the properties. And so when we take a look at the cash flow, they're only earning, say, 4%, maybe 5% return on equity. Here, we're at 16%. Hi, this is Kris German from The Apartment Dealer. Welcome back to The Apartment Dealer Show. Today, we're going to dig through the financials on my personal, most recent substantial improvement project. Now, hopefully you've already seen episode 1 of this 2-part series, and really it's multiple parts to this playlist here on our YouTube channel, because this project actually began a little over 2 years ago, and we've completed, it's a 4-unit property, and we've completed 1 unit at a time over time. And here now just completed the 4th and final unit. So if you haven't seen those previous episodes, it might make sense to do so, but definitely at least the most recent episode, because I walk you through the finished materials. I walk you through the unit itself. Here today, we're going to discuss just the financials. Now, originally I purchased this 4-unit property for $650,000. Now, this property was on the open market. It was listed by an outside agent. It wasn't my own personal listing. It wasn't a property one of my clients owned. I had to compete on the open market as an investor. The agent who had the listing represented me, but we ended up purchasing the property for $650,000. Now, when we purchased the property, the rents at that time, if you can imagine, were $800, $700, and 2 other units at $750. Now, some investors take an approach that say, well, you really don't want to raise the rents too much because then you might have tenant turnover. If you collect too high of a rent, those type of tenants will continue to ask for improvements to the property. That's not my experience. And if you've been a subscriber to our YouTube channel for any time, you know that I've done multiple substantial improvement projects. I just don't have that experience. And there's no way that I would have left the rents at these levels, because our highest rent today is $1,645, and we're going to dig into that. But there you go, from $700 to $1,645. It's a big upswing in income. So let's start there. So the total gross income, and we'll show the rent statement from when I closed escrow. We'll share with you my closing statement. We'll show with you the rent statement signed by the seller in escrow, so you can see this is all factual. Gross rents were $3,000. Now, having completed this project, renovating all 4 units, the monthly gross is now $6,510. That's an upswing of 117%. That's why we go through the energy and the expense is to get these rental rates up, especially, again, this is Southern California. We're under the bubble here of rent control. It's very meaningful to do so. Now, just for a quick review, in case you haven't seen the previous episodes, the capital improvements. What was completed? How much did it cost? Let's start with the plumbing. This was an older property, so it had original galvanized plumbing. Per unit, that cost us $4,500 to change all the hot and cold water lines to copper. And we did both the horizontal and the vertical lines. So the lines that run underneath the property horizontally, and then as they come up the wall to the stub outs to each of the fixtures, all copper, $4,500 per unit. Drains. So because this is raised foundation, I changed all the drains, all that old cast iron pipes that were there, changed them over to plastic. That cost us $1,500 per unit to change and update all the drains. The bathrooms, and again, we'll show some pictures here, but the bathrooms, total overhaul, everything included, $7,500 per bathroom. The kitchens, total overhaul, and we also redesigned the layout of the kitchens. We also added washer and dryer hookups in those units, $8,500 per unit. The electrical, we updated the electrical throughout the entire unit, updated it all to Romax, and we updated the electrical subpanels, $9,000 per unit. The flooring, this is tile flooring, porcelain tile throughout, $3,500. The remodel of the wall shared between the living room and the bedroom. You'll remember that we created extra space in the living room by eliminating the closet in the bedroom to give us a little area for a dining table, because there's no dining room in these 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartments. And when we eliminated the closet in the bedroom, we added a closet to the hallway. I'll get to that expense here in a second. But the remodeling of that area between the living room and the bedroom, $3,500. And then that closet space, by redoing the hallway area, which includes both space for their clothes and storage, as well as the water heater, that was $1,500 per unit. We updated all the hot water heaters. Now, 2 units have traditional tank heaters. The other 2 have tankless, and it was because the way things were set up and kind of the sizing of that hallway was a little bit different in each unit. Nonetheless, though, we got each of those done for $1,500 per apartment. And then AC. So we put ACs installed in the wall, both living room and bedroom, all units. So 2 dual AC heating style units. So your material, labor, you're cutting it into the stucco and so forth, $1,500 per unit. The back door. So some of these units, we had to move the back door. We updated the back door, new back door, and what have you, $750 per unit. Blinds. We went with Foxwood blinds. You can find these at Home Depot and the like. Material and labor, $950 per unit. Plugs and switches. Of course, we're modernizing the unit, so we want Decora switches and plugs. That was about $2,800 per unit. And then new appliances. So new stove, new over-the-range microwave, $850. That's with install and what have you. So roughly each unit was $47,850. So in total for the 4 units, that's $191,400. But there were some extras along the way, so we're going to round up here. $195,000 of capital improvement that my wife and I have put into this property over the last 2 years. So what did that amount to? We already discussed that the rents went from $3,000 to $6,150, 170% increase in the gross income. But what does that mean in terms of my cash on cash return and the increase in the property's value? Let's dig into that. The expenses. So these units have individual meters for electricity and gas. So I, as the owner, pay for water and trash. My trash expense annually is $867, and that's fairly cheap. I can't tell you quite why the trash is that low, because of all my properties, it's the lowest, but $867 a year. Water is about $2,367, $2,400 annually. Property taxes, about $8,500. Property insurance, $2,150. And then maintenance. I'm setting aside $2,000 annually for maintenance. Now remember, everything is brand new. The plumbing, the drains, the electrical, everything. Nonetheless, I'm setting aside $500 per unit annually because something could happen, obviously. So we're going to say total annual expenses here, $15,885. Well, my gross income is $78,120 minus $15,885 expenses. So my NOI, my net operating income, is $62,235. Now let's go to the sales comparables. Now you know that I sell investment real estate for a living. I'm a broker by day, investor by night, we'll say, right? Investor by night and by weekend. So I know how to underwrite properties. I know how to pick out sales comparables. I am not just picking those comparables that are most favorable to my property or to this video. This is the reality of the sales data that was available over the course of the last 12 months based upon the size of the property, bedroom count, and so forth. Here's what we found. Of those sales comparables that we utilized, the average price per unit was $262,500. The average GRM was 13.25, gross rent multiplier. How many times would you have to multiply the annual gross income to equal the sales price? That's GRM. The average for the sales comparables, 13.25. And then the average cap rate was 5%. Again, explained easily, if you were to buy a property all cash, what would be your rate of return? That's cap rate. Or to calculate it, take your NOI divided by the price. That'll give you your cap rate. So that's what we're sizing up my property against when we take a look at the sales comparables. Now, here's a fatal flaw that many investors make. They'll know that, let's say the cap rate in an area, like here, let's say it's 5%. Then they'll use their personal expenses, literally how much they spent in a year for the main culprits here are property taxes and then their maintenance. And they'll come up with a low annual expense figure. Well, here's the problem with that. Number one, the banks are going to underwrite the property with a general percentage for maintenance, irregardless of your invoices. Except in this case where I literally have completed and updated all the major systems, then you can provide the proof of those capital expenditures. But nonetheless, the banks are going to use a general percentage. Second, when it comes to property taxes, remember, you bought your property, assumably, many years ago. You have a lower basis. But the property taxes, when we're looking at a sale, evaluating the current value of a property, you got to take a look at what's the amount of the property tax that the new investor is going to pay based upon the new price. And this is where the numbers get skewed, because oftentimes I'll meet with investors and they'll say, well, Kris, I know that the cap rate in the area is essentially X. I did the calculations myself. That means my property is worth, this amount. I said, well, show me your expenses. And what did they do? Inevitably, they're utilizing their Schedule E and they pulled how much they spend on maintenance, and they're using their own personal property tax rate. That's not how you would do this to determine market value. You would do that to determine your rate of return, which I'm going to show you here in a second for me personally with the property. But right now we're talking about market value. Okay, so we have our average price per unit, our GRM, and our cap rate. So if you now take my property, the income, expenses, and so forth, and if we value the property based on a price per unit, that would put a value of the property at $1,050,000. If you went by GRM, given the average, it would put the property's value at $1,035,000. If you went by capitalization rate, by cap rate, it would put the value at $1,145,000. So I'm going to determine that the property's value is $1,150,000 because of the sales comparables that sold and that we looked at, none of them had the amount, nowhere near the capital improvement that this property had, let alone even just something simple like updated plumbing. Here, again, we have updated plumbing, updated electrical, updated sub-panels, everything except the main water line from the meter to the connection at the house, that's original. Everything else, once you hit the front doorstep of all these units and into the interior, all brand new. So I'm going to pin a value of $1,150,000. And I did take into account the new property taxes based upon that value to achieve that number. So then what's the upswing in value? Well, I originally purchased the property for $650,000. Today, the property is worth $1,150,000. Needless to say, it's worth a bundle more than what I paid, but obviously there was expense along the way. So what's my rate of return? Okay, $650,000 purchase price. My down payment was $195,000 when I originally purchased the property. I've invested, my wife and I, $195,000 capital expenditure. So total, how much of Kris's cash is into the deal? $390,000. So if I take a look at my current net income, okay, my current net income right now is $62,235. That's my gross income minus Kris's expenses, what my property tax rate is, what I'm paying for insurance and so forth, okay? $62,235. So if you take that number divided by how much I have invested in the property. My current rate of return on my money is 16%. Now, when we evaluate properties on behalf of many of our clients, we do a property evaluation. Maybe they're just curious as to what the value of their property is. It's been some time since they had an evaluation. Maybe they're considering a sale. Maybe, unfortunately, there's been a death and they need to know the value at the time of sale. Okay, when we're evaluating a property, we also take a look at what is their current cash on equity return. And here locally in the markets that we service, and so again, I'm local here, my team and I represent investors in the sale of multifamily properties in both, or not in both, but I should say multiple counties, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Riverside, Orange County. Now, what is my increase in equity? Well, we walk through it, right? So if the value is $1,150,000, I have a loan amount of $455,000. I have the CapEx plus my cash into the deal. So my growth in equity in this property is 78%. I've had a 78% upswing in equity. So this is pillar one of the three-pillar approach to investing. Pillar one is maximization. You have an investment property. Are you maximizing the return, the available return in that property by building up the equity from within by focusing on very specific capital improvements? And those capital improvements will attract a certain tenant base, typically millennials. And for those of you that have been to our live educational events, we walk through this more in detail about why that tenant base, their percentage of the population, all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is here that once you've completed this sort of project, the substantial improvement, that the quality of the asset is that much better. The equity has gone up. Your tenant base is more ideal, in my opinion, in terms of just timeliness in payments, how much income they're bringing in themselves, their debt to income ratio, and so forth, more ideal tenant base. This is what it has to offer. You focus on pillar one, you maximize it. We've done that here. Now, I've done, in my opinion, everything that's meaningful. We will be painting the property. Doesn't change the value much. We will be updating the landscaping. That doesn't change the value much. Maybe in doing those items, you are able to get back what you put into them. So however much I spend on landscaping, maybe I get that back. If I paint the building, I'll recoup that in value. But it doesn't have much of a return like the items that I focused on. I always focus on the interiors first. And you may wonder, well, Kris, what if the building is in need of a paint job? What if the landscaping is in very bad shape? You'd be surprised if you drove by some of Kris's properties. The landscaping is in very poor shape. But if you look at my rental rates, probably on average, 10 to 15% above market. So we have found that the tenants, they're in their space. They're rarely outside of their unit. They could care less about the outside. It helps. And I'm not saying you just let it totally deteriorate. But my point is here, if you only have so much money to spend, you don't start on the outside. You start on the inside. And that's what we've done here. Pillar one, check, completed. So then where do we move on to? Pillar two. And this is what I have to contemplate is now that I've maximized my return, I have this uptick in equity. Do we hang on to the property and enjoy the cash flow? Again, 16% return on my money, hard to beat. Or do I look at a potential 1031 exchange? This is a 4-unit property. Could I sell, take the equity, maybe move into a 6-unit property, a 7-unit property? That's something that we'll have to evaluate. My gut feeling now is we're going to hold the property for some time. We have others that are other properties that we're looking at doing a 1031 exchange with right now. So this wouldn't be the ideal one, especially since we just finished the capital improvement. But if I had no other property, let's say this was my one and only property, then definitely I'd be looking at a 1031 exchange because how else would I grow? For many of our investors, they're equity rich and what I say cash poor in the sense that they're not earning oodles and oodles of cash every year. So they don't have the ability to buy a new building every year or 2 years. They're not able to come up with the down payment. But what do they have? They have the equity in an existing property or a couple of properties that they could utilize to continue to expand, pillar two, maximize, to continue to expand their portfolio. And that's for those of you that have, my first property, that 3-unit that you've seen in some of the videos. My wife and I started there. That 3-unit became an 8-unit, then that 8-unit helped us buy another 4-unit, and that's growth, 3 to 12 in total. So that's the idea. I wanted to share these numbers with you because I wanted you to get the reality of what do the financials look like, and for you to decide for yourself, did this project make sense? Based upon how much money that I've put into the project and the rate of return, you could decide for yourself, did this project make sense? Maybe it's something to look at for yourself and your current properties. And again, keep in mind, you got to think about what's the current rental rate that a tenant's paying versus what market is. And if you do the right type of renovation, you'll get above market. There's not a lot of good supply quality-wise in the market in terms of vacant units. So what's that differential? How long would it take you to recoup the money that's going to cost you to do a remodel? And if there's a big enough spread, then it's something definitely to consider. I hope you found today's video informative. I hope that this information encourages you in the direction of Pillar 1, maximization, improving your current properties, and contemplating, well, now what do we do next? How do we continue to grow and improve our financial legacy? Please give the video a like. That helps us get this information into the hands of other investors. And if you haven't, as of yet, subscribe to our channel. This way you get alerts as we release the new content, new videos that we have coming up here. And as always, this is Kris German from The Apartment Dealer, wishing you positive cash flow, tenants who behave, and much protection from Uncle Sam. Till next time.